right, good morning, everybody. I think we'll get started a little late, but first off, I'd like to welcome you to this session. What we're going to talk about is the dimensions of urban resilience, and these are dimensions in many different ways. But what we want to try to do is take you through a conversation with people who are practitioners, who are working in the field, who are working from cities, working from networks, working with global-based organizations, working with aid and support organizations, and try to give you a sense of what's happening on the ground in a couple of the cities that we work with, and how that relates and links to the global agenda currently being debated in Geneva and Nairobi, and ultimately in the General Assembly later this year in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals. But the first part of the presentation is to give you an opportunity to hear what's happening today in the city of Wellington, New Zealand. The first speaker is Mr. Kaine Thompson. He's the Chief of Staff for the city of Wellington. He has a background in hazard management in New Zealand and post-event recovery programming as well in New Zealand. And Kaine's going to talk a little bit about the experience of Wellington in terms of building and delivering their resilience agenda. Kaine, the floor is yours. Yeah, take that out of the way. Yeah.
First test. Kia ora, kia orana, taloha ni, malo elele, warm Pacific greetings, and buenos dias from Wellington, New Zealand. I hope I got my accent right. I just commented on the photos that we had up before. I looked like I'd just got off a plane from 34 hours of flight, and indeed I did. But it's good to be here, beautiful city. May I first acknowledge our moderator, Dan Nelson, who leads the City Resilience Profiling Program. The program will help to deliver common tools for first measuring and second enhancing city resilience to the impacts of multiple hazards. Wellington is proud to have been selected in 2013 to be part of the City Resilience Profiling Program. We believe that our participation raises Wellington's global profile not only as a leader in resilience planning, but as a centre of excellence for future research and development in this area. This work is crucial to enhancing resilience, not just in Wellington, but cities like ours around the world, and we take our role very seriously. Our activities present a well-developed and strategic approach to Wellington's resilience profile as a city, one we will continue to build upon over time. From the practical implementation of our building code to the development of strategies that deal with future sea level rise and climate change to supporting community initiatives designed to build resilience in our communities from the ground up in ways that work for those communities, we are certainly very focused. This for me today will be about defining the environment in which we build and what resilience means for Wellington. I want to focus on the primary hazard we face in Wellington, the chance of large damage-causing earthquakes, as a way of outlining our approach to resilience. Clearly, we're not unique in facing hazards. As I've said, earthquakes are an ever-present risk, but so too is sea level rise and climate change. Our city-scale hazards are not just natural either. In Wellington, we must deal with the fallout of regulatory failure in the early 1990s, leading to construction with materials that are already no longer weather-tight in many properties. In general terms, if we look in towards our city, we continue to progress well in terms of understanding the extent of the hazards that we face, and we're becoming ever more clear about the implications of them on us and the environment we've built in which to live. If we look outwards, we want to continue supporting the sharing of knowledge, experience and expertise, and we want to continue advocating for and working in a cooperative international environment. In whatever form of work we're involved with, there is the ever-present need to express with clarity what our objective is, what is the outcome, what is success, what does good look like. That starts with a question, and for Wellington the question has been, is, and will no doubt continue to be, Have we built the city we would rebuild, knowing that we have to rebuild it one day? We inch closer to a broad consensus in Wellington that yes, we have built the city we would rebuild after a disaster. It's about making sure we don't have to rebuild too much of it, and that we have a plan for recovery, re-establishment, and repopulation. Called the world's coolest little capital, Wellington is known for its vibrant arts scene, world-class cafe and restaurant culture, and active outdoor lifestyle. Wellington is a happy mix of a modern and artistic urban form ringed closely by an attractive natural environment. With an urban population of just over 200,000, most of us live in or close to our city. Wellington is New Zealand's capital. It is also the core city to a large and diverse region, a region that is home to around 500,000 people, with a total land area that is 80% rural. Of the remaining 20%, that's where the remaining 80% of us live. While all these marketable features are core to our offering as a city, it is, as they say, what lies beneath, about which we are primarily concerned. Principally, we face the hazards posed by earthquakes. It is an immediate, an ever-present and dangerous hazard. It is one that exists on a large scale in Wellington every day, and we're all too often reminded not to become too complacent. Our first priority is to continue building our readiness in dealing with such earthquakes. There were, until late October this year, 3 significant active fault lines running through the region on similar scales to those of the San Andreas Fault in California. One just happens to run right through the middle of the city. I say until late October because research that we have and will continue to support has found a 4th significant active fault line. The Council's financial partnership with National Scientific Research Institutes resulted in the discovery of that new fault. Our response to that discovery has been gratifying. We were able to publicly confirm that given the work we have done to understand the implications of hazards we face, there is no change to the city's risk profile. It did give rise to the perennial question from our local media about whether we should shift our capital from Wellington to Auckland just because it's bigger. The confident response we can give to that question is no. We've built, in our view, not only a beautiful city, but we are building a resilient one that our country continues to have confidence in being able to recover from disaster. They say we live in the shadow of a doomsday clock that's constantly set to zero. As many cities like ours know, the big one might happen at any moment. We speak of resilience in physical terms for the most part, but there is a part of the New Zealand psyche that adds to a universal sense of resilience, come what may, regardless of whether there is a basis for it or not. You may have heard the phrase from New Zealand or Australia, she'll be right. I'm not sure who she is, but she has a lot to answer for. And thankfully, that attitude changed a generation ago. Our once cavalier outlook has matured to an evidence-based approach. Our once laissez-faire demeanour has long since been replaced with a pragmatic urgency. That aspect of our psyche, the she'll be right refrain, has energetically given way to an emerging confidence driven from better research, better analysis, better preparedness, and internationally recognised high standards. And so, over more recent generations, we can turn to the development and implementation of resilient construction techniques, well-developed analytics that generate better asset intelligence, and importantly, social acceptance of the message that in actual fact, she won't be right unless we make it right. So what are we doing to make it right? Wellington has been working some years now on strengthening its infrastructure, and in light of large earthquakes destroying our southern city of Christchurch, those efforts have certainly stepped up. With over €6 billion worth of assets over the last decade, we have been targeting critical routes throughout the city and strengthening our roads and bridges. Major strengthening work has been undertaken on one of only 2 arterial routes out of Wellington, and major works have been started to create new exit routes when they're needed. We continue to upgrade critical water mains, and the council has been replacing older critical lifeline infrastructure, pipes, fixtures and valves. We're over halfway into upgrading all of the city's social housing stock. All 40 council housing assets have at least been assessed and work undertaken as part of an enduring program. We have been working through the list of buildings we own to complete detailed structural assessments on those buildings which are potentially earthquake prone. In recent years, we introduced a new grant to build community resilience by supporting projects that build emergency preparedness in local neighbourhoods. The Council's earthquake-focused resilience response has included examinations of what changes could be made to our city's district plan, a plan which establishes the rules and guidelines for the developments in our city. These values clearly have the potential to make strengthening work either too expensive or too bureaucratic for the owners of buildings and sites. We've begun a process to ease this tension. Grant funding is now available to owners of listed heritage properties to help fund building conservation, with incentives introduced in this year's civic budget to accelerate citywide physical strengthening programs. We recently completed a full assessment process on buildings constructed before 1976. Nearly 5,000 buildings in that era have been assessed, and as a result, we know the scale of the work. It is enormous, but it is also achievable for us. Under a nationally consistent system, an estimated 15,000 to 25,000 earthquake-prone buildings will be identified through assessments within 5 years of new laws now currently taking effect. Public registers are also being published throughout New Zealand listing buildings that are not compliant with life-preserving strength standards, both to inform the public but also to encourage owners, with a somewhat heavy hand, to take steps towards strengthening their properties. This represents progress for New Zealand, and pleasingly, in Wellington, we're well ahead of the national curve, but there is still a very long way to go. But it is key to the development of resilient city strategies to not only develop programs delivering enhanced readiness to the hazards we face, but to be doing so with the best possible information on which to be making necessary decisions. Wellington is well positioned to evolve existing indices of resilience beyond just physical infrastructure. Part of the story for our ongoing work will be in strengthening our social and cultural infrastructure as well. The development of Wellington's resilience profile is quite wide-ranging, but given our hazardous environment, coordinated civil defence emergency management has led to the formalisation of a regional emergency management office. This structure brings together the collective resources of the region's 9 local authorities and the welfare and emergency services of central government. This delivers a comprehensive and strategic approach with high-value resilience intelligence. Our geography constrains some key activities and critical service provision to placement in high-risk areas. We have a motorway on a fault line. We have critical infrastructure on a fault line. As a result, a joint Wellington Lifelines group has been established and undertaken an assessment of vulnerabilities and is in the process of developing appropriate response and recovery tools. The priority of our resilience program is first about the preservation of life. Our process has been about developing the assessment tools to understand the impacts of our hazards. The second has been about a prioritised program of responding to the threat of those hazards. As we work through these responses, we will bring our communities with us and continue to enhance our ground-up response concurrent with our citywide resilience strategy implementation. Alongside traditional democratic structures, other agreements can be made with our council and communities for the establishment of entities such as a local trust. The role of this trust is to assist in the development of resilience in communities throughout the area of Oahu, which is primarily rural, an area covering about the same as half that of Barcelona. The trust funded by council provides education and undertakes research at a neighbourhood level. We will continue to provide financial support to trusts such as this and initiatives such as this, and we will continue to provide the expertise necessary to take strategies and develop implementation plans for them, because well done is better than well said. So I think I'm keeping to time pretty well. I started with a question. We ask ourselves, would we build the city we have built and are building? Simply, the answer is yes. In the face of severe impacts from a range of hazards, our steps are threefold. The first is to understand the impact of our hazards, both natural and man-made. The second is to understand our capability of addressing impacts through high-quality information about our critical assets and our people. And third, develop and implement coordinated action plans that are first about the preservation of life, and second, about giving confidence to our people that we may recover, rebuild, and repopulate. Finally, we know that while the answer is yes, more important than strategy for doing that is putting in place the people, the projects, and the resources to deliver on the plan. And that is what we are currently tasking ourselves with. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Kaine. You'll have an opportunity to ask questions of the panelists once we're through all of the presentations, but an interesting view on a very comprehensive, multi-dimensional urban resilience strategy underway and under implementation in the city of Wellington. From there, I'd like to move to introduce you to Manuel Valdes, who is the chief resilience expert within the city of Barcelona, an old friend and a master at this part of the. That's okay. Manuel, please.
Thank you for the presentation, Dan. Okay. Good morning. I'd like to focus the presentation in three main points. The first one is that the experience of the city of Barcelona in the field of resilience, not just actually, and then all the history of the resilience of the city, but especially with the creation of the resilience department in the city. We have structured all the resilient things in the city, and I like to present it. The second one is that all the tools we developed for the resilience creation in the city are open tools. And we developed it with collaboration with the ITC department of the city, and they are open for the rest of the city that like to share these tools with us. And the third one is, I think, an important point in the resilience strategy of the city is the collaboration with the external entities, the external enterprises, universities, and institutes. And I will show. And I will show how does this collaboration advance. So, the first part is the organization of the Resilience Department of the City Council. I think that the Resilience Department of the city was one of the first resilience departments created in the cities around the world. But it don't mean that the city didn't act in the resilient field in their history. We created the network of the underground reservoir for the flooding periods in the city. We created the emergency plans of the city and created the desalinization plan for the draft episodes of the city. But they were created in different fields, not together, not crossed together. So just 5 years ago, the city created the resilience department for cross all the initiative and obtain the synergies between all the policies related to resilience in the city. In fact, this is the scheme, the main scheme of the resilience department, created for create value for a city. We have three main points. The first one is the control room for the risk management. So it receives all the incidences in the cities and try to share these incidents with the rest of enterprises, with the rest of the control rooms of the city. We have 28 control rooms. And then to manage as better as possible all the incidents in the cities and how to activate the risk plans, etc. So this is the first point for the risk management. But it's not enough. We need to reduce the probability of this risk in the city. And then we have, for the risk analysis, we have the situation room. It is the second tool. This situation room is a platform for the information, for cross all the information the city have, and then it helps us to analyze all the data we have in the control room, for analyze the cause of this data, for do an analysis, and for try to reduce the probability of occurrence of this risk. So this is the second stage. And the third stage is analyzing what in the city happens. So give this information to the resilience board for the risk reduction. The resilience board try to develop project for the risk reduction in the city. not just in the city council and with the collaboration of all the enterprises. And it facilitates that in the second stage of the spiral, we will have a risk reduction respect to the first round. So this is a global structure of the city department. So you can see this is the global anatomy of the city. It's composed by the environment, then the infrastructure that connect the environment with the public space and the nodes of the public space when the people live in different scales, because the resilience have projects in different scales, to the scales of block or to the scale of communities, for example, and then the information that the city needs for manage and create resilience in the best form as possible. So when we have an incident in one of the systems, it affects the rest of the system. You know that it is a system of systems. And then for analyze all this information, we created this situation room. Actually, we can have it as a mobile tool inside the city. We are developing that. In December, we will finish the first stage, but we are using actually this situation room by many of the city managers. The main content of this situation room is the offline information, so slow information that we are accumulating then, and the online information related to the incidents that we put there, and analyzing the offline information, we try to do the best and as soon as possible to avoid or to resolve the problem created in the city. This is a global integration of the situation room with the city operative system that is created by the ITC department in the city, and the communication with the rest of the stakeholders related to resilience. Then we have there all the information we have of all the out of the city systems is the infrastructure, for example, of the rest of the city, the rest of system, the electricity, the gas, the transportation, then the service that they give using this infrastructure, and then the incidences they have registered in their infrastructure for share in the moment of the crisis or in the moment of incidents. So these are the three main parts of this information. So we have all the systems related to energy, related to water cycle. We have integrated everything in our platform situation room for understanding and for managing and resilience creation. And this is the integration of the rest of the control rooms of the city linked to our control room for shared information in the moment of the incidences. This is the basis of the situation room. These are the emergency plans. You can put here in the play of the incidents all the systems we have, and the main tool is for analyze the incidences, the emergencies. It's actually working. This black point is one incident, one not here in the presentation, but if we open the iPad, we can see the real incidences that are occurring in the city. You can open that and see the information about the incidences, and you can focus there and analyze what is happening around, and to send information to the rest of the systems, to the institution that manage the people there and around. If there are vulnerable people or something like that, they can have this information online in the moment of occurrence of these incidents. And we can analyze and predict using the information that we have put in here about this is, for example, the incidences in the public space of the city divided by the different branches of cleaning and water cycle and etc. And we analyze in the territory, in the different parts of territory, how does it influence, and with the evolution of the time, how does it affect. Okay, we have classified all the incidences in 5 levels in function of the affection of the city, but these are many things inside. I prefer to explain the ideas. It is, for example, the sound contamination of cities. We have different sources of information, and this is the integration of all this information for using and for focus in our action for the reduction of the noise. And then the combination of the resources we have in the city, the energetical resources. So for the solar thermic potential, the photovoltaic solar power potential, and the power potential for wind potential for electricity production. So I like to specialize to present you this tool, because for us is the newest tool integrated to our system. So together with this control room that operates, they have, we are in the process of renewal of this control room. Actually, they will have finished it in December 15, and they will have integrated to all their protocols this tool for operate the cities and for create resilience. So I think for us it's very important that, because it's not just for manage and then for analysis and resilient creation, it's integrated to all the process, and especially is useful not just for the city council and then for the rest of the companies that work with us in this process. The private companies use this information because they send us their incidences, and when they are looking for reduce the moment of the incidence or the moment of the crisis, we are sharing their information with the rest of the companies, and they can focus in their problem, and they don't have to call and to understand what is happening there, who is affected or not. We do this process. So we help them in these special moments, and then they can be called by me when they don't have problem, but another problem is registered in the city by another company, and they are affected by this problem. So they didn't have to know that because of the press, because of the media, and me directly give them information using the slow information they give us. So this private consortium that is supporting actually the City Council in the Resilience Program is supporting to the UN Habitat Office for the Resilience that have the main headquarters here in Barcelona, and they are proposing to create this new platform for the urban resilience and to explain to all the world that like to listen about it, their experience as private enterprises and universities in February of the next year. We will celebrate in Barcelona a meeting related to the Barcelona experience in resilience that will be practically managed by the private enterprise that work with us. So UN Habitat and the City Council will host everybody, but I think the most important is the criteria of the private enterprises. So we will explain our part, but the main part will be related to private and the universities and institutes. I think it's everything. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Manuel. So we go from the pulling together a very complex, multi-layered urban resilience strategy under implementation in Wellington to a level now where the resilience strategy has been implemented in Barcelona incrementally over the last 12 years or so. Now has an extremely efficient and functional monitoring and learning install. From here, I want to take you back into the city and to start to talk about one of the key stakeholders in this whole urban resilience and urban development agenda. And that's a conversation I'd like Doug Ragan to take us through, focusing on youth and future leaders in developing programs and support for building more resilient cities. Doug.
Hi, Dan. Hi, thank you very much. Honored to be here, beautiful city. And really as well honored to talk about how young people can contribute to resilience. Just to start off, UN Habitat, we're based out of Nairobi, Kenya, one of the 2 UN agencies based in the Global South. And for that reason, I think we have a lot of interaction with young people in the Global South, and which gives us, in a way, a unique perspective. One of the things to know is that demographically, the South is young and the North is old. That's just the way it's been, unless you throw in Australia and New Zealand there, it gets a bit confusing. But nonetheless, in general, the developed world, and if you see this map, kind of that purple stripped across this top, and then the yellowish part, and it almost disappears actually in Africa with age. So what we see when we're working there is when I was just in Somalia a week ago. I was working with young people there to create resilience in a place that barely has anything, and we're talking incredible impoverishment. We're also talking with Somalia, the youngest country in the world. I mean, we have the average age is somewhere in around 17. So, I mean, and in many of the cities we're working in, over 70% of the population is under the age of 30. So if you don't engage this demographic, you're really, pardon the pun, you're really hooped. I mean, it's very, very difficult to get anywhere. What's been really interesting, though, especially in the global conversation around youth pre the Arab Spring, is there was no conversation. Really, the young people weren't on the radar as being anything other than clients and or terrorists and or just somebody that we had to deal with, weren't sure how. Post-Arab Spring, and literally I break it down into Tunisia +1 and Tunisia -1. The day before Tunisia, and what happened there where a young guy decided to immolate himself because of not being able to set up a stand on the side of the road, and following that through all the different things that have happened in the Arab Spring, then it went on to Istanbul and went on to Sao Paulo, and it's continuing. What we've seen, though, is we've seen a huge recognition that this is a demographic. And at the start of the Arab Spring, at least, there was a huge recognition that youth could be a positive force, that they could take down 50-year dictatorships. Now, the conversations got a bit muddled since then, and there's been many other factors, but still, the conversation has continued. And that's what I'm really here to talk about, is how the young people can be plugged in, and giving you a few examples. Again, this is an emergent area in understanding. It's not necessarily an emergent area in practice. Young people are first responders. They are there. When disasters happen in Asia, when disasters happen out there around, this happens in the developing world, they're the majority. B, they're the young and the able-bodied and the people that get out there and make it happen. The other thing that's interesting around the smart cities concept is they are also the first adopters of technology. And so when I'm sitting in the middle of Nairobi, Kenya, and there's now more cell phones than there are people, and you have some of the fastest internet speeds around, and some of the most inexpensive internet speeds around, things are changing rapidly. Your development is moving at an exponential rate, not just around technology. So the first thing that, I'm trying to watch the time here so I don't go on, but the first thing that I started when I started working with UN Habitat in Nairobi was around the concept of mapping. And basically, as we all know, technology, the biggest thing in technology is geospatial. It's all about the fact that you can mark and map and do whatever, know where you are in the world. So geospatial mapping was the first thing, and that was around 2009. I don't know if you've ever heard of Kibera. It is one of the largest slums in Nairobi. And at the time of 2009, it was a complete blank spot on the map. It was actually considered to be a forest. So this is a very large slum. Within 1 year, with young people going in there was a project called Map Kibera. Within 1 year, they basically mapped a whole community. And really, you have to think about what that means. It means they told the story of people that never had a story. They've told the place, so that was kind of the first thing. So suddenly they just started mapping things, and we've seen that everywhere. It's just you can map absolutely everything these days, and there's all these new stories coming to the fore. So that was the first area that we started seeing a resilience being created around a sense of place and a sense of ownership by young people in places such as this. This is one of the young guys that we worked with in the project Map Kibera, and basically it was a combination of just get out and draw on the map, as well as punch it into a program called Ushahidi, another program called OpenStreetMaps, which is kind of like Google but for everybody and not just Google for Google. And so suddenly they were able to do a lot. They were able to put down information. And what was really interesting on the youth side and equaling the youth leadership side is they were generating knowledge that was not there. Or if the knowledge was there, it was in the heads of the people or the people at a very, very localized level that you could never aggregate. Suddenly you're able to aggregate knowledge, and with that aggregation comes resilience. And that started in that area. So what we started to see following this initial Map Kibera 2009 to 2011 or so, we started to see certain niche areas coming out. One of them was safety. And specifically safety around young women. And we've seen this, the Nobel Peace Prize was given to somebody, a young girl, and also a man in India, who both were dealing with women's safety. So one of the projects that's come out through one of our programs called the Urban Youth Fund was a project called Harass Map. And specifically, this as well came out from the Arab Spring. It came out from the fact that the cards were in the air when the Arab Spring happened in Cairo. It was very, very dangerous for women. So these women came together using technology, using this Ushahidi platform. And Ushahidi means testament in Kiswahili. And it was developed actually after the political violence in 2007 in Kenya by a Kenyan. Using this platform, they were able to start mapping the safe spaces and the unsafe spaces in Cairo. And then they started building huge programs around it, not just technology, but they started building awareness programs. They started engaging people and such. So suddenly there was a resilience in around the social realm that hadn't been there before. This has been replicated in India. It's all over the place. I mean, again, we've heard of all the issues around young women in India. There's a program called Safety Pin, which and pin meaning pinning on a map. There's also another program that we're funding there as well. So you see these things popping up all over the place. As well, we're trying to initiate this project. This is Ahmed Al-Hindawi. I was in Somalia again with him in Mogadishu a month ago. He is the envoy for youth to the Secretary General. Again, strong commitment by the UN system to continue working with young people and specifically young women. So this was where we're in the center of, in the Ministry of Youth in the center of Mogadishu, and specifically talking about how we could use many, many different ways of increasing the resilience of young Somali youth. Again, incredibly challenging place to be, but with if you can tap into that young dynamism, you can really go for it. Or, and as I always say, if you don't tap into it, and you see this in Somalia actually incredibly distinctly, the term, who knows what the term Al-Shabaab means? So Al-Shabaab means youth. So it's what happened in Somalia when we were in Mogadishu is Ahmed, who is from Jordan, basically came up with a term that caught on like wildfire in the media. They're saying we have to take back the concept of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab means young people. Young people are dynamic. But if you don't invest in young people, you have the double-edged sword. One side cuts well and you go great. The other side cuts you, and you have to be careful. What we've seen on the sense of technology, again, advancing, is again, working with the same kind of group of these young people who started in Kibera, and then it's been expanding like wildfire around basic services. So one of the things that's happening now, as of in 2014, is that some of the young people, as well as some young people from the States, have engaged through the Rockefeller Foundation, and they're creating what they're calling a water sanitation portal in Kibera, back in this slum area. And basically what they're doing is they're just going out there and mapping critical infrastructure around water and sanitation. Infrastructure that's never been mapped before. And if you ever know, Kibera is a specific example of a very unique place in the world where you swing a cat and you hit 5 NGOs. There are so many people there because the UN system and everything is based in Nairobi. There's so much going on. But what's happened here what's happened here is that before, when NGOs and very well-meaning people would come into a slum, they'd lay down pipe. That would be the first thing. Because the analysis is, there's no water, it's horrible, we have to solve this, we have an idea, here's lay down pipe. Within a week, the pipe's ripped up. So the next step is, we'll lay down more pipe. Great, the pipe's ripped up and then someone gets beaten up. And if you go as far as the third time, you might get someone killed. In general, because water is delivered by gangs. It's a public-private partnership. But you cannot just go in with simplistic answers. So what's happening now, though, again, is the narrative's been changed. When suddenly you know where the pipes are, suddenly you know where the water is, suddenly you know that standpipe goes dry 3 months of the year, the other 3 months, and the other 9 months of the year, it's owned by a gang and it's charged 3 times as much as the standpipe a mile away. You start learning more detail unless you're able to have knowledge, localized knowledge, again, and this is not just on a Kibera or that level, but also you start aggregating the knowledge, and suddenly then you're at local government. That's the next big challenge, is it's great to be able to create all this knowledge, create these super citizens, but then who do you go to? Do you go to local government? Well, we're not sure. Do you go to the cops? Well, we're not sure. So there's this new form of government being created that's being driven through e-governance and such that is quite exciting. And that, I don't know the answer, honestly, but if you can help me. We're basically, like I said, this is very emergent. And then lastly, just, again, I guess this kind of wraps up where I'm coming from, and where our executive director has, is that youth, we always oftentimes just invest in youth for the future. And really, we don't have time. We don't have time with what's going on right now to invest in these young people. If we have, you don't have to invest a huge amount, but incisive investment that's very effective and very efficient can bring about huge change, exponential change, and that's what we're seeing. And so what I'm hoping around youth and in resilience and such is that I think the first thing we have to do as a UN agency at least is A, figure out that we're not going to do it all for everybody. B, figure out that we're a convener like is happening here. And C, aggregate knowledge, like aggregate best practices. There's some amazing stuff going on. We all know, of course, that's what the whole Smart Cities movement's about. But the Smart Cities movement has to hit the rest of the world, the other 3/4. Because we have to really figure out, we can't be the solution isn't putting sensors in everywhere. They get stolen. You have to, I mean, what about human sensors? How can you do that? What does this mean? And this is an area, and the place that we're actually seeing it really is in India, which I've spent over the last couple of months a few times, where you're seeing a country that's saying, yes, smart cities we're in, and with the new prime minister, it's amazing, but also saying we have 1.3 billion people. How are we going to do this? How can we do this at scale? And one of our suggestions is that I really think you need to pick up as youth as leaders and really focus on how we can use that demographic in a very positive way. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Doug. Thanks, Doug. So another very important demographic within the urban system, but Doug's last comment about going to scale, I'd like to introduce you to Michael Berkowitz, who's the head of the 100 Resilient Cities Initiative, to talk a little bit more about how this kind of thinking is actually going to scale. First through the program, and secondly, outside the 100 Resilient Cities program into the community of practice. Michael.
So, do I hit play or do you? So, this is my last act of a 3-week road trip. I started in New Orleans, I went to Delhi, India, Amman, Jordan, and now here. So the good news is I'm amazingly inspired by interacting and talking to so many people about resilience, about what's facing cities, about opportunities and next steps. So that's the good news. The bad news is I'm literally going to run off this stage at 12:30 to catch a plane. So if you want to hook up with me, please find me through the website or through social media. So I will not stick around. What I'm going to do, as Dan mentioned, is I'm going to talk a little bit about what 100 Resilient Cities is. I'm going to talk a little bit about what's emerging out of our first year of work. And finally, I'll talk a little bit about the future of partnerships and one particular partnership that is important. So.
My mayor was.
Anyone want to help me flip the slides, maybe? There we go. So let's first start with the definition, because everyone's got a different definition, and really this is ours, and it's a working definition. But urban resilience is the capacity of individuals, communities, institutions, businesses, and systems within a city to survive, adapt, and grow, no matter what kind of chronic stresses and acute shocks they experience. And so you can tell by that definition that we come at resilience in from a very, very broad place. First, let's talk about shocks and stresses. So lots of times people enter the resilience space through shocks. It's the acute events like earthquakes, hurricanes, hazardous materials accidents, terrorism, and so on. But if you think about the chronic stresses, the more persistent things that threaten a city, those can be just as damaging. Think about in North America, the one city that's almost been wiped off the map is Detroit. It didn't come from Hurricane Katrina or Superstorm Sandy or the Northridge earthquake. It came from the persistent impacts of being exposed to macroeconomic conditions that didn't favor the one industry that Detroit was tied to, and that was the American automobile industry. So looking at, and as we think about things like climate change and we think about things like migration, we see things like food, water, and energy shortage, really high levels of violence and murder. All are things that can threaten a city. And we like to start at a place that looks at all of those together. In particular, because it helps us find the intersections between those things. Where is the intersection in New Orleans between storm planning and public health and public health challenges around obesity and murder and violence? And at first you think of those as three really siloed things, but when you start to investigate, you look at what is the transportation, where are the public spaces, the parks, to soak up water, that provide communities places to be together, that allow people to exercise, that bring people out on the streets and reduce violence. All of those things, we start to see where those intersections are. So we start at a very broad place. And the second is that we believe that urban resilience is about more than just infrastructure or emergency response. It's about cohesive communities and diverse economies and good stewardship of the infrastructure, both the natural infrastructure and the built environment, and about good integrated leadership with strong stakeholders at the table. All of those things are going to be important when a city has to face a really severe stress or a sudden and impactful shock. And so we help cities go through a process that tries to look at all of those. Maybe just one other thing before I get to, well, I'll do it from here, is that 100 Resilient Cities is Rockefeller Foundation's $100 million commitment to build urban resilience worldwide. And we see really two problems that we're trying to address. One is that cities are really complex ecosystems. They have lots of different stakeholders at different levels of government, in different silos, in different sectors, in the private sector, as Manuel referenced, in civil society, and trying to organize those sectors and silos and come up with what the priorities are is something that has challenged cities. The second is that cities too often reinvent solutions and do that at a cost. It's this, I come from New York City government, and there's a hubris involved. It's only things that were invented in New York City will work in New York City. We're so unique. Or I'm sure my friends at Habitat have heard the phrase, the African context bandied about more than once. And there are unique elements of the African context, or I was just in Delhi, the Indian context. But there are also ways to leverage and scale solutions in a way that we're only now as a community of urbanists starting to do. And so what we do is we provide cities 4 kinds of support. We've got funding to hire a chief resilience officer, a senior person in municipal government, but who's got the breadth and the scope to work across the sectors and the silos and really advocate, coordinate, and connect the dots around resilience. And the second is we're helping cities create a resilience strategy. Think about it as a sort of 6 to 9 month process that looks at what the hazards and risks are, what this city is already doing, what its key strengths and weaknesses are, where the gaps are, to come up with what are priority areas and what are some initiatives to support those priorities. And we think that, think of those first two as trying to solve for the complexity. You have a single senior point of contact, and you have a rigorous bought-in strategy that cities can rally around. The third is a platform of services and resources that cities can tap into. These are partners. Ushahidi is one. Palantir, the big data analytics company, is another. Swiss Re, and so on, that are looking to better scale solutions into cities, and this will help. It's well curated, help make that scaling easier for cities. And finally, membership in a peer-to-peer network for the CROs so they can support each other and share best practice. And those two are trying to help solutions, things that are working out there, get into cities and do it more efficiently. Just a little bit about the program. So we named our first 32 cities last year. We've taken applications for a second cohort. Both Wellington and Barcelona submitted really excellent applications. In fact, Manuel is probably the one CRO in the entire world that we haven't actually funded. But he's sort of doing that job that we envision. But we had, over the 2 years, almost 700 applications. We selected 32 in December of 2013, and we'll select another 32. These are the 32 in the first cohort. You can see over 6 continents and a really wide geography. These are the actual cities, and you can see a real conscious mix of global north and global south size, capacity, and so on. But you'd be surprised, even with this diversity, and what we tried to do here is to select cities that everyone could recognize themselves in. All the rest of the 10,000 cities that are out there could recognize themselves in. Even with this diversity, there's still an amazing amount of commonality, similarities, and best practice sharing in really unusual ways. So, you tend to think the sophisticated cities won't learn anything from the non-sophisticated cities, and that's actually absolutely not true. Let me just quickly run through 3 of the big trends. So we've been working in these first 32 cities for the last year. I'll just quickly run through 3 trends and issues that we're seeing and we're talking to our CROs about. The first is that, this is just one stat I've heard a million different ways to couch how much infrastructure is going to go into the urbanization in the next 20, 30 years. 57 trillion of infrastructure investment through 2030. And what that means, infrastructure is just, you talk about the double-edged sword. It's this great double-edged sword. In some ways, it's a massive resilience enhancer. The well-placed storm drain, the good public transportation system, the libraries, the parks, those are all things that enhance cities' resilience in many ways. But how many of us have seen infrastructure done poorly? The road that severs a neighborhood apart, the big complex that spills stormwater into poor neighborhoods to one side or the other. Infrastructure can really be a resilience detractor. And so we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to do better infrastructure. And I'm going to skip through the slides about rebuild by design. But if you're interested, Google rebuild by design to see how I think infrastructure could be done better. It's a proposal for a seawall in Manhattan, but it's green and gray infrastructure, it's community involvement, it's arts, all of those type of things. The second big sort of macro trend that we're talking to our CROs about is this issue about inequality and social cohesion. In some ways, for me, that's the big differentiator between resilient cities and not resilient cities. We don't know what the next thing is going to be. Is it going to be, I was in New York City in the 90s. I spent the 90s planning. I was an emergency planner. I spent the 90s planning for hurricanes. And what happened? 2 planes flew into 2 buildings. And so you don't know what the next big disaster is going to be, but if you have cohesive communities where neighbors check on neighbors, where people can absorb the shocks, whether it's the mistake by a cop shooting the wrong person, whether it's a blackout, whether it's an earthquake, if you have that kind of cohesion, you can weather lots of different things. And I would say our cities are becoming less and less equitable. And so I would say, and you're getting migrations of different ethnic groups and cultures into cities, and so this is going to be one of the really defining issues in terms of urban resilience. It's not a place our CROs actually play in very well. They come from infrastructure, they come from different government, and they're not in the equity and cohesion in place largely, and so we're talking to them about that. Finally, this idea that resilience challenges transcend jurisdictions, borders, and boundaries, and that if you're going to build resilience in cities, you're going to have to rely on coalition building, networking, partnering to do all of that. Even the most powerful cities, so I just came from India, where the municipalities are the least powerful organizations there are. But there are cities where they have lots of power. New York City runs 5 different counties, has a metropolitan workforce of 240,000. And I was just with the first deputy mayor who was complaining he didn't have the power to do the things that he wanted to do to build resilience. It's always going to be that way. And so you've got to, as a resilience advocate and activist, and you've got to be able to do coalition building and informal power. And I know I'm out of time, but just one last sentence about this picture is that this trash, one of the key resilience challenges you see, particularly all over the global south, is the trash doesn't get picked up, it gets in the storm drains, it causes flooding, which causes disease. And if you think about how that's managed, solid waste is picked up at the municipal or the sub-municipal level, flood control is at the regional level, and public health is almost always at the national level. And so someone who can cut across and look at these issues and find where the value chain is and get the trash picked up in the right way because it will save all these other things is really, really important. Finally, just a quick word about coalition building and partnering. Urban is such a frothy space right now. There's lots of folks who are working in it, and I think it's really heartening. And cities that we work in, and I know across this panel, the cities that you all work in, cities can get confused with so many different actors having so many different things. We see that all over. And so I think it's time for us to continue to think about partnering. And at the World Urban Forum in Medellin, we signed the Medellin collaboration with Habitat, with ISDR, with the World Bank and some of the regional development banks with C40 to try to align ourselves. And I think we're early days in it, but for me this is how do we leverage our activity? How do we have it be a multiplier? And through that may be one of the key ways we can do it. So thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Michael. So moving out of the single city into the network of cities, talking a little bit about the network of practitioners and support organizations like Rockefeller and the World Bank, and now the link to the broadest possible global network. And I'd like to call on Mohammed Bouswari from United Cities and Local Government, just to talk a little bit about how this resonates with his constituency.
Thank you very much, Dan. To be the last speaker is not always a good thing, but I will manage to have my presentation with the few minutes remaining. UCLG is a worldwide organization of local and regional government around the world, and we have members in more than 140 countries. UCLG is based in Barcelona since 2004, and in our organization we try to advocate and represent the interests of local and regional government vis-à-vis of the international community. Our main objectives, the first one is to strengthen the decentralization all over the world. This was a strong trend until the last years when we noticed a phenomenon of recentralization in some countries, and this is not a good news for local government, and this happened since the economic crisis in 2008. The second objective we have is to strengthen the local self-government, to reinforce local democracy, and also to reinforce the international cooperation between cities and local government, and to strengthen the solidarity. We also support the local government to provide public services, and especially water, sanitation, education, transport, and healthcare. Regarding the disaster risk reduction, our organization have taken in 2008 a political position with a clear engagement from our members to face this problem and putting it high in the local agenda. Since that time, we have been working with partners such as UN Habitat, UNHCR, and other local government associations to help cities and local government to deal with disaster risk reduction through training sessions, awareness campaign, or through resilience profiling program initiated by UN Habitat. In March 2015, there will be the third World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction in Sendai, Japan, and UCLG is one of the organizing partners for the local government major group, and we will organize the participation and the implication of mayors in this big gathering. In Sunday, we will adopt the post-2015 disaster risk reduction framework. This is the continuation of the HAGO framework that was adopted in 2005, and this HFA and to strengthen the new framework that will be adopted in Sunday will be the continuation and strengthening of the HAGO framework. Regarding our position is to lobby and advocate for local government strategy on disaster risk. And we have three main messages on this. The first one is strengthening the decentralization. We believe that local governments are the closest level of governance to citizens, and they should have a clear responsibility to face urban challenges. Looking for synergy with other multilateral processes, such as climate change, the post-2015 agenda, and the new urban agenda that will be adopted by, at the Habitat 3 conference in 2016. Finally, I want to share with you some points that we have, a statement that we have presented last Monday in Geneva in the second PrepCom for the World Conference on Disaster Risk Reduction. And this statement was based mainly on the financing. Cities in developing countries are growing at fast pace, surpassing their ability to finance sustainable and resilient infrastructure. It is estimated that 6 billion people, which is the 2/3 of the world population, will live in cities by 2015. Besides, more than $1,000 billion is needed each year to finance poor infrastructure in low and middle income countries, which represent, with cities representing 70% of these needs. This was estimated by the World Bank. The massive urbanization is a big challenge for many countries that are facing deficit or degradation in their infrastructure, adding to the need to invest in more resilient infrastructure to meet the increasing risk of disaster as well as the related energy shortage. Local authorities in most countries play a role in the development and improvement of the living standards of the population and are considered key partners to the government in developing public policies and building the necessary infrastructure for economic development and better quality of life. Yet, local authorities are not sufficiently equipped and financed to address the multi-hazard challenges, be it climate change or disaster risk. Financing disaster risk involves more than a reflection on the subject itself. It requires a much broader approach that integrates the financing of the infrastructure as well as those related to the resilience of the territory. Several factors prevent cities in developing countries from accessing the necessary funding to ensure sustainable urban development, in particular the opportunities of local capital markets. Very often, the financial resources dedicated to disaster risk reduction rely predominantly on external resources or are integrated in the state budget. Yet, at least two reasons why financing local government strategy for disaster risk reduction is important. The first one, local government manage public resources to meet the demand of citizens. Second, the role of local government in addressing major global challenges to protect its people, assets, and infrastructure. Finally, there must be a national policy and the legal framework for disaster risk reduction with clear responsibilities and decentralized local capacity and financial resources to reduce risk at a local level. This is the position and the situation that UCLG is facing, and we are supporting many initiatives, and the one that is initiated by UN Habitat for the program on profiling cities program. Well, this is my the 2 or 3 points that I want to share with you, and I'm ready to answer any question you have. Thank you very much.
And thank you, Mohammed. What we've tried to do today is to kind of take you on a bit of a narrative that really starts with evolving strategies in addressing resilience in complex situations with multiple hazard streams from Wellington to sophisticated use of technology for measuring and monitoring the resilience of cities in Barcelona, looking at the connection between technology and youth and how avoiding looking at youth as a critical stakeholder in city development has both its positive and negative implications, up to scale with the 100 Resilient Cities program and looking much more broadly around the world at the interesting work that's happening with 100 Resilient Cities and the community of practice that's evolved as a part of that, and up into the global level with Mohammed. And happily, he mentioned the intergovernmental processes that are underway right now, the World Conference in March, the post-2015 Sustainable Development Goal meetings that will take place in September next year, and following that, the third UN Conference on Human Settlements, Habitat 3, which will take place in 2016. These are all intergovernmental processes that are enriched by the experiences of everybody on this panel and many, many more people around the world. And I hope you'll join me in thanking all of these gentlemen for coming up today, and I hope you found that interesting. Guys? Good. I don't know if we have time, do we? I think we're about to. Okay, so if there are any burning questions, feel free. We've got a few minutes here. Yes, can you just say your name? Or there's a mic right up here. So if you wouldn't mind, first. 1, 2, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Pilar. I work in the City Council of Barcelona. Just one question. I believe that the human attitude, the attitude of the citizens is also very important for the resilience of a city. So I would like to know, how do you expect to put this in place? Thank you.
Okay. Anybody want to take that one?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that cities, several of us up here have assessment tools for how to understand where cities are strong and weak. And I think the attitude that you're talking about touches on what I was talking about with cohesion. In other words, how well do people see themselves as a part of the city, not the municipal government. I'm talking about the ecosystem that is the city. So understanding where those are strong or weak, and I think that there are things that municipalities, that churches, that NGOs, other stakeholders can do to address the places where the attitude of the citizens isn't strong. There, of course, it's complex. It's the cultural norms that go back hundreds of years, of course. But there are also places. You look at Singapore, where there are 3 really distinct groups of people: Indians, Malays, and
Chinese.
Indians, Malays, and Chinese. Singapore, since the 60s, took a very active, proactive stance on how to integrate those folks and get them to see themselves as one Singaporean citizen. And I think Singapore is not perfect. There are lots, and it's not necessarily replicable in some ways, but there are lots of lessons to be learned for how really direct intervention can change attitudes and behavior.
I think that some of the stuff that Doug was talking about as well around building social capital through engagement and connecting networks to other networks is also another strategy that perhaps helps to build that social capital. Yes?
Hi. Hello, thank you. My name is Aaron Fishbone, recently in city government in Seattle, Washington, and I guess my question is mostly for Kaine. We did a lot in terms of neighborhood-based community development around emergency preparedness under the premise that people couldn't necessarily expect city services to reach them for potentially 3 days after a disaster. So I'm curious specifically, what sort of things are you doing to work with the neighborhoods and develop their capacity and individual leadership for post-disaster?
Everything is small steps. So I think the first priority for us about engaging people at a neighborhood level in their own response strategies is about understanding the risks that they face. And to varying degrees, communities within Wellington have varying degrees of understanding of what the risks are. But yes, the key message is understand that you will be without services for 3 days. What does that mean? Why is that the case? Who takes first priority? And as I said before, it's step by step by step, and it's very incremental, and it takes a long time to change attitudes. But I think we're improving. The earthquakes in Christchurch gave us a wake-up call. Last year we had 5 significant earthquakes, over 6.5 in Wellington, which definitely sharpens the senses, but we can't let that dull. We have to continue to motivate and to keep energized. So, it's basic understanding. What is the risk? What is your role in preparing for the risk? And how can we assist you rather than what are we going to do for you?
Okay, I'm afraid we're out of time. This is a discussion I think many of us would like to stick around and have for a much longer period of time, but we're being pressured to move out, and I want to thank you all for coming. We want to thank you for coming, and I hope we'll see each other again somewhere else. Michael, safe journey.